Hello, and you're listening to Your Majesty's Secret Podcast. I like my podcast shaken, not stirred. Only on the Four-Eyed Radio Network. If you'd like to check out more shows, go to foureyedradio.com.
Bond. James Bond. Shaken, not stirred.
Utter one more syllable and I'll have you killed.
I thought Christmas only comes once a year.
For your eyes only, darling.
I never joke about my word 007.
For England, James?
Come in, Univex. James Bond here.
Am I going to have a problem with you, Bond?
Allow me to introduce myself.
You're that secret agent! That English secret agent from England!
No, you're cleverer than you look.
Still better than looking cleverer than you are.
My God, what's Bond doing?
I think he's attempting re-entry, sir.
007 reporting for duty.
Hello, the name's Berkeley, Ziggy Berkeley from Cinema on the Rocks. And with me is Eric Dewey from Socially Awkward Studios. And you are listening to Her Majesty's Secret Podcast, only on the Four-Eyed Radio Network. That's right, you're listening to the show where we talk about bondage, James Bondage. And tonight we're talking about someone who may be interested in a little bondage. You never know. That's actually one of the things we're going to discuss when we dedicate this episode to Miss Moneypenny.
Oh, yep. This should be an interesting discussion, specifically the topics that we're going to delve into here are some that a lot of people out there may not even know exists, and those who do will get a special treat out of this, and those who don't, it should be an interesting discussion.
Indeed it should. Now, first thing, of course, is a little bit of background. We were first introduced to Miss Moneypenny by Mr. Ian Fleming in his novels about James Bond back in the 50s. And contrary to what the experience of people who have only been exposed to the films is, Miss Moneypenny is exclusively M's executive secretary. And that's it. She is not Bond's secretary. She is not secretary to any of the other 00s. Bond has his own secretary. In fact, Bond has gone through a few secretaries, including, and I really, really hate Ian Fleming for doing this because I can never bring myself to say Layla Ponsonby correctly unless I say it really slowly because I want to call her Ponsnobby.
How do you know that she isn't?
Well, I don't think Bond would necessarily put up with that shit. So, no, Bond has his own personal secretary, Layla. She spells it kinda different, Layla. I'm done now. I promise.
All right.
And followed by Miss Mary Goodnight, who was unfortunately retranslated into the films as the most inept field agent this side of Rosie Carver, and in fact, even more so, despite the fact that she wasn't a deliberate traitor, because she was even worse. She was just effing stupid. So, those are Bond's secretaries. Moneypenny was not his secretary. She was her own character with them, and she was loosely based on the real executive secretary to the actual head of the British Secret Service, whom, of course, Fleming would have known through his professional contacts of old. Her name was originally something entirely different, but he changed it so it sounded a little less like the name of the real person, and I think that's all for the better. I like the name Moneypenny. I think it's got a nice ring to it.
Her real name was actually Dinero Nickel.
Wow.
No, it wasn't. I'm kidding. Guys, where are you going?
Okay,
I'll show
just
myself
for
out.
that. Just for that. There's something I forgot to mention in our previous episode.
Oh, okay.
Which was the James Bond car episode.
Yes.
And it comes in the form of a question. Do you know how Q always managed to get 007's vehicles back into shape after he destroyed them?
How?
Bondo. Lots of Bondo.
And we're even.
Eric earned that, ladies and gentlemen. Just saying.
Ay. All right. Well, fair enough.
Now, before I go too far into my little game of Monopoly that I often threaten to do, what are your impressions of Moneypenny as we first met her from Ian Fleming?
In the novels, I don't really remember her much, which is probably the best way you can describe how she is in those novels, very forgettable. She didn't stand out very much to me anyways. It's not something that I was, that exceptional standoutedness didn't seem to be there for me. However, I think they did a much better job in the movies of giving her a better character.
Indeed, because I agree with you. In Fleming's novels, I think she was pretty much treated as furniture, much like most women in Ian Fleming's novels, come to think of it. But she just really didn't stand out that much. The only thing that really makes her stand out is that even though she very obviously and explicitly, according to the words of Fleming himself, carries a torch for 007, she never throws herself at him. Indeed, that privilege is instead given to Mary Goodnight, and that probably actually does happen during the course of The Man with the Golden Gun. But yeah, Moneypenny is the one woman whom Bond interacts with on a regular basis, who is not elderly, and yet whom he's not trying to get in bed, even though, because of his personality, he flirts with her constantly. Yes. But it's kind of like flirting with your best friend's wife, or, your sister-in-law or something like that. Just, it's never going to go anywhere. It's just fun conversation. And so that, to me, is the only thing that stands out about her in the Fleming novels.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. It's really not anything special. However, in the movies, we get to see a lot more of her character. It's fantastic.
And what's incredible about that is that we have the feeling that we get to see so much more of her character, and she becomes so much a part of the James Bond movie experience. And yet, in the classic Bond era, so, of course, whenever we say that, we're referring to the pre-Craig reboot era. Right. So everything from Dr. No up to Die Another Day, she has almost no screen time. She has screen time that goes anywhere from a minute and a half to maybe 5 minutes. I would venture to surmise that if you add up all of Moneypenny's screen time in all of the original canon Bond movies, it would add up to less than the shortest runtime of a Bond movie.
I wonder if anybody's done that. That's something to actually look at. I'm certainly not going to be the one to do it, but I'm curious as to whether or not it's actually been done.
Now, with that said, if someone would like to make a large donation to the Her Majesty's Secret Podcast Fund, which doesn't exist, but if you would like it to exist and like to make that donation so we can afford to have the time to do that, we will get right on that for you.
Absolutely, yeah. If I can quit my job and just do podcasts full time, I will certainly bite the bullet and do that.
Indeed, as would I. But yeah, and I think in the movies, the original intention was not necessarily to make her any more memorable, any more special, much like I don't think that was the original intention with the character of Q, any of those. But thanks to the people they originally cast in these roles, it's the strength of the performances that makes these characters stand out. And particularly, in, of course, the case of this evening, Miss Moneypenny, as wonderfully realized by Lois Maxwell.
Yes. She did an absolutely fantastic job with the character, and I think if she had been flat, if she hadn't been anything special, it's very, very possible we wouldn't have seen her in more than the first couple of films, let alone 14 films later that she played that same part. So, yeah, I think she did a fantastic job.
It's very rare that we don't get an appearance from Miss Moneypenny during the classic era, going from Connery up through Roger Moore. Mm-hmm. And whenever she's on the screen, Lois Maxwell just makes her presence known, whether it's just through a wonderful smile or whether it's through a knowing look or just some other signature moments we'll get to shortly. She makes her 2 minutes count whenever she's on the screen. And she gave her own opinion of what she thought of the character. One thing that she pointed out is, of course, that she's in love with Bond, but, says Maxwell, she's too much of a lady to go chasing after him. So she smiles, bides her time. In a way, you can't blame her. Every woman would like to live dangerously with James Bond, if only for 20 minutes or half a night. Which, even though she says that, did you really catch that from her? That if push came to shove, so to speak, with Lois Maxwell's Moneypenny, do you think it ever could have happened even after a bottle of the best Bollinger out there?
I never got that impression from Lois Maxwell's Moneypenny, no. It always seemed to be a friendly flirtation. Now, people are known to do strange things when they drink, and it's always possible. There was obviously an attraction there both directions. So counting it out after a bottle of champagne is a little too far a stretch for me, because I've known stranger hookups to happen with less alcohol. So, but if it did happen, it would have been regretted in the morning. It wouldn't be something that was welcomed.
I will agree in that if it ever happened, they would both regret it. They would both think it was a horrendous mistake. They would try and just pretend it never happened, but of course it would ruin everything that they ever had, and they would probably resort to barely speaking to each other again for the rest of their lives as much as professionally possible. With that said, I also think that there are some people who have incredible willpower, even in the face of our good lady friend ethyl alcohol, and I don't think it would have happened. And if nothing else, I think Bond himself would have stopped it.
Yeah, of the two of them, I'm sure he can handle more liquor better, and for him to be drunk enough to get to that point, it would take a hell of a lot of drinking. And by that point, Moneypenny would be passed out or dead of alcohol poisoning.
Exactly.
So the chances of it actually happening, very, very slim to none. Like I said, I don't mean to say that it could happen. It's more of I wouldn't count anything out, because alcohol, it has its own way about it.
Now, with that in mind, when you think of Lois Maxwell's Moneypenny, are there any particular moments that stand out for you? We can trade off for a bit.
Lois Maxwell specifically?
Yes.
Definitely being the best part of On Her Majesty's Secret Service, without saying a word. The look she gives at the end of the wedding scene to George Lazenby's less than stellar Bond, but she never lets that stop her from putting on a great performance, and it's one of the better scenes in that entire film, and she's not even speaking in it.
I think that really was the greatest show of class in that movie, and one of the all-time outstanding moments for any of the quote-unquote side characters. I mean, in that moment, Lazenby, whether it's on his own or because everyone else is collectively psychically forcing him to, he gets it.
Right.
And when he does the hat toss, it's vintage 007. And Maxwell's reaction when she catches it is just priceless. It is a beautiful, beautiful moment. I cannot agree more. That is easily, for me, her very best shining moment. Now, with that said, I think that her second most outstanding moment is really her last, whether she knew it was going to be or not. And that is in A View to a Kill, when she accompanies everyone down to the Royal Ascot races, and she's betting on the race. And she's just sitting there oblivious. She's, come on, Blue! Come on, Blue! And she's swearing when she loses. And then Bond hands her his ticket and says, cash this in for me. And she's like, it's Pegasus! It's a side of Moneypenny you don't ever really get to see. And again, she's out of the office. She's not there.
Yep.
So she gets to be more of herself. We get to see her as a human being.
Right.
And I think that's one place where Lois Maxwell really brought it out, because I think she knew how special that was, how rare that was going to be. And to me, that was another just great standout moment.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely a fun scene to begin with, and she makes it even more so by being her.
So are there any others that stand out for you in particular?
If I was watching the movie, and it would probably jump out at me, but nothing that's springing to mind right this exact second. Just a lot of, the casual flirtation, the back and forth that her and Bond have in the office, usually interrupted by M, who always seems to know exactly what's happening out there. Whether or not he can straight up hear it or he just knows that it's happening remains to be seen. But it's still just great banter back and forth, and just love it every time.
Agreed. And another thing that I always find wonderful about her performance is how unflappable Maxwell makes Moneypenny out to be, because of course we know that M's office travels. Sometimes it's in a half-sunken ship.
Yeah, as one does.
Sometimes it's in the pyramids of Giza, and always at the front is Miss Moneypenny, looking like, oh yeah, the office is in the middle of the pyramids, and I'm just here typing. They see me rolling, So I really, really love everything she brought to the character, and if there's one word that sums it up for me, it's class.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. It's absolutely fantastic.
And I think more than anything, she is the reason why we remember Moneypenny as fondly as we do going throughout the series, because she took someone who Ian Fleming wrote as a doormat and basically just a plot expedient and made her something special. Something so special that James Bond's own secretaries, who take more of a role in the books, are completely forgotten.
Wait, he had a second? What?
Exactly. Because when one of them finally shows up as a character, she's not a secretary. She's just a bumbling agent. Emphasis on bumbling and next to nothing on agent. Yeah. So Moneypenny just took over the whole show, and it's all Lois Maxwell, and I'm good with that. That's fine with me.
Absolutely, yeah. She wouldn't have been asked back 14 times if she wasn't doing something special.
Indeed. Now, after her death, Roger Moore indicated that she was a little bit disappointed because she did not necessarily expect A View to a Kill to be her last film. Because, of course, she was somewhat, one could say, unceremoniously put out to pasture with Roger Moore. And one could easily suggest that ageism was involved. And I don't think there's really any disputing that.
When you look at who replaced her, I mean, nothing against Caroline Bliss. She was fine. She's gorgeous, super hot. But obviously, they were going for a specific look. They were going for young and attractive over any type of acting ability or gravitas whatsoever, which is a shame.
This is not to say that Lois Maxwell was she an attractive lady at the start, but she aged with grace.
Oh, absolutely.
So, but again, as you said, there was definite ageism, and they were going for the pretty blonde thing who would probably not look out of place sitting next to Cheryl Tiegs or Christy Brinkley at the time, because remember, this was the mid-'80s. But what Moore had also indicated was that what Lois Maxwell had been gunning for was that Moneypenny would then take her place as M, and that was shot down with very little ceremony. And yet, we have
2 movies later.
Yeah. We have to wonder if that planted the seed for the arrival of Dame Judi Dench as M come 1995. I think a case can be made that we have Lois Maxwell to thank for Judi Dench.
It's very possible. Without the seed being planted of, hey, what if we did this? Obviously, they weren't ready to do it in the mid to late 80s. But come the mid-90s, when it had been 6 years since a Bond flick had come out, suddenly they were a little more amiable to the idea.
But instead, we got the pretty young thing. And as you said, nothing against Caroline Bliss, but...
she's absolutely stunning. Absolutely gorgeous. And those big old glasses they gave her to try to make her look nerdy and bookish.
I'm okay with that. I like nerdy and bookish.
Oh, indeed. Yes. See,
we had an unrelated conversation where I mentioned holding out for a librarian.
So, well, there you go. You're looking for your late 80s Caroline Bliss.
Not saying no. But realistically, in terms of the portrayal of the character of Moneypenny, it was a step backwards. Because we went from a complex character who made the most out of her 2 minutes to, wait, that was Moneypenny?
What?
As opposed to just the random eye candy of The Office?
Yeah.
And it's because that's really how she was presented. There wasn't that specialness to her.
Yeah. Yeah, her and Dalton did not have the same chemistry that Lois Maxwell had with any of the Bonds that she worked with. And so it was a little disappointing in that respect. Not unexpected for the time. You know, you look at movie making during that time frame, and an actress like Lois Maxwell didn't stand a chance of getting any serious part, unfortunately, which sucks. And hopefully we've gotten to a point where we're mostly past that now, but it still sucks that it ever was.
Indeed. And that brings us on to Caroline Bliss's successor, because, of course, come 1995, we are hitting the reset switch, not the reboot switch, but the reset switch, So we're recasting pretty much anybody whose name is not Desmond Llewellyn. And what we end up with is the appropriately named Samantha Bond to play Moneypenny. She's very 90s.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I was going to say, Samantha Bond, I really enjoyed her portrayal of Moneypenny. There were a couple of moments, we'll talk about, that I felt went outside what I imagine as the Moneypenny character, but that that's not her fault. That's on the writers for that. But for the most part, I really did enjoy her portrayal. Lois Maxwell, she was not, but she did what she could with what she was given, and I think that says an awful lot, actually, as well.
I think it does, and I agree with you. I think as a performer given this role, she did absolutely everything that she could with it. She gave it personality beyond the script. However, it was also Moneypenny being taken in a very different direction. And by a very different direction, I mean half a Budweiser and the skirts down is my prediction of what would have happened. In fact, I think one of the moments you're alluding to...
Yeah, it's not even... She was on the clock during the time. I don't even think half a Budweiser was in there. All it would have taken was Bond saying yes. And because it was that type of relationship. It was she's in love with him, but he's not so much. He's just flirting, but she's actually in love with him, is the impression that I got from their relationship, which is completely different than the Moneypenny we got from Lois Maxwell.
Very, very much so. I mean, and she puts up a brave front. Like, as I recall, you've never had me. Like a badge of honor, and yet at the same time that she's taking pride in that she has never fallen for his charms, she's also very much indicating that, oh, but I would.
Yeah.
And we have the evidence of it in what I know you have called one of your least favorite scenes ever, which is the virtual reality glasses in Die Another Day.
Yeah. The even momentary thought that this Moneypenny, in this timeline, in this Bond universe that we're in, and Bond being together is just wrong. And even though it turns out to be, that almost makes it worse that it was in virtual reality, because then it really highlights the fact that, okay, she's into it, he's not. It just becomes kind of
pathetic?
Yes, that's a great word for it. I wasn't going to necessarily go that harsh, but no, absolutely 100% pathetic. And I don't want to think of Moneypenny in that light, because she shouldn't be. And Samantha Bond's previous portrayal of her was not pathetic. It was less than what we expected based on Lois Maxwell's performance, but it was not by any stretch pathetic. But that did seem so.
Indeed. And one thing I will give Samantha Bond credit for that I don't think you could have gotten out of Lois Maxwell or Caroline Bliss is when she would say the flat-out dirty lines of the Brosnan era with a relatively straight face. I don't think Lois Maxwell could possibly have said the phrase cunning linguist without coughing herself sick. Just call that a guess.
Yeah, you're probably right.
But so what we have is an improvement over Caroline Bliss and definitely a modernization. Mm-hmm. But as with so many things in Die Another Day, it just got taken too far.
Just one more reason to hate Die Another Day. That's really what it comes down to.
I get it in the context of Ning Shin's theory, because Bond wants to know that she was ready to boff him at a moment's notice. So that's his fantasy as he's dying.
Yeah, that is yet another thing that fits in well when you think of the theory we're speaking of. If you're not familiar, go back and listen to our episode in which we talk about the fan theory. What did we title that one?
Question Judgments.
Question Judgments, yes. We talk about a fan theory that was presented by one of our listeners who stated that basically the theory involves the entirety of Die Another Day. Well, not the entirety of, I should say. Everything post-opening credits happens inside Bond's mind as he lay dying. So everything after Madonna singing, well, and you can't see my air quotes as I say singing, but they're there, trust me.
Auto-tune.
Yeah, that's what I think of when I think Bond themes. I think EDM immediately. Anyway, yeah, and it's a very interesting theory, especially when you think about some of the things. You do get that feeling throughout the entire film that every character seems to be speaking in Bond's voice. Everybody's throwing out the sharp one-liners. Everybody's full of themselves. Everybody's, and it ends up making sense. Even so far as the bad guy literally trying to transform himself into Bond. It just makes so much sense on so many levels that it's a perfect fan theory, and I'm glad we go back and listen to that episode for our in-depth discussion of it, because that was a fantastic discussion. So I'm really hoping some other fan theories pop up about some of these films, because I'd love to go back and think about some of these other films in different lights as well. So if you have a fan theory about any of the Bond films, whether it's yours or whether you heard it somewhere, drop us a line, let us know. You can throw a comment up on this episode, on any of our episodes. You can shoot us an email. I'm Eric at hermajestiespod.com or Eric at 4eyeradio.com. You can tweet me at Eric J. Dewey. You can drop a message on our Facebook page, facebook.com/hermajestiespod. We make it as easy as we can for you, really.
Yeah, and you can tweet me at CinemaOTR. You can email me at Ziggy at cinemaontherocks.com. And for those of you who didn't realize what our website is, it's hermajestiespod.com.
.com. Oh, wait, no, that's something else. But, yeah, absolutely. Drop us a line. We'd love to hear that, because I would love to do another episode like that. That was a fun episode, and it allowed us to go back and watch Die Another Day without hating ourselves for it.
Exactly.
Which is always good.
So, Ming Shin, I still owe you a drink. Now, and that is also the only way in which the scene with Samantha Bond's Moneypenny getting ready to do it with Bond is palatable. Which brings us to the last film, Moneypenny.
It's important to note that we did, so now Die Another Day, obviously, that was where that Bond died. And
Yes.
we move on to the Craig era where it's a full reboot, hard reboot, which is only softened in any way, shape, or form by the fact that they did bring back Dame Judi Dench as M, but it is
As
a much
one
different.
should.
Yeah, well, of course. But it was definitely a much different M than we had seen previously. So it's not M as we know it. It's a very different M, and that's good, because that's what we needed after Die Another Day. We needed a change, but when you have the ability to get Judi Dench in your film, you get Judi Dench in your film. That's just what you do.
Indeed.
So, but we do skip a couple of films with no Moneypenny. We get Casino Royale and Quantum of Solace.
But we do get
no
a
Moneypenny.
Moneypenny joke.
Indeed. In
the
Casino Royale.
Yes, every penny of it. But we don't get Naomi Harris until Skyfall.
Mm-hmm.
And even though the savvy viewer can kind of guess who she's going to turn out to be, I admit I guessed beforehand the first time I saw it. Not instantly. I'm not going to go that far and be that guy. But
that guy. Uh-huh.
But basically, the moment she got relegated to a desk, it clicked. For me, anyway.
Yep.
What about for you?
Yeah, I think it was around that same time that we kind of realized that, okay, this is who they're going with for that. And it was quite obvious very early on that it was a very different interpretation of the Moneypenny character. Obviously, starting out with her as an agent who then makes a mistake and gets demoted to desk duty, as opposed to having been an agent, having been a secretary all along. It's a very, very different version of the character for sure.
Indeed. And of course, there's also the fact that we actually have now a character of color, which is something that you would definitely not have seen from Ian Fleming.
That is unfortunately true. And honestly, it's I don't know if it's sad to say or good to say, but I didn't really think about it until you brought it up right now. It didn't click to me in that same respect.
Because it means that it doesn't matter, that we could just picture her as Moneypenny, no questions asked.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I don't know. Those things don't tend to bother me unless it's the other way around. Usually when I see the quote unquote whitewashing of Hollywood, when you see a character that you interpret to be a specific race and specifically because of certain aspects of their character, not just because they happen to be, because that happens. I mean, there are characters that can go back and forth and it doesn't bother me at all. Nick Fury, to me,
whatever.
Exactly. It's like, it doesn't matter. Kingpin, the same way. Kingpin can go back and forth and it doesn't bother me in any way, shape, or form.
Whereas Adam Sandler as Charlie Chan would be a problem.
Yeah, let's not, please. That part didn't faze me, didn't concern me in any way, shape, or form. She did a fantastic job. For me, when it comes to actresses and actors who play these roles, it's their ability to play the part that matters. If they do the character justice, I care less if they're purple. It really doesn't make a lick of difference. But she does do a fantastic job in the part as it's written for these films, which is dramatically different than anything we've seen previously in either the novels or the previous Eon films. I dare say the closest we've seen to Naomi Harris's Moneypenny is in the other thing we're going to talk about here in a few minutes.
Well, that thought. But yes, I would agree. Now, with that said, what do you think about Moneypenny coming out from behind the desk for more than just delivering a message or betting on horses? What do you think about her? I'm not talking about in the beginning as a field agent, because, okay, that's her new legend, that's fine. But afterwards, she takes on a much more active role than anyone would expect an executive assistant at any job, including the British Secret Service, to do. I mean, she's still basically doing stuff out there in the field, much more so than a secretary.
Well, yeah, and I think that if they hadn't set it up as they did in Skyfall with her being a field agent to begin with, then I would have a problem with it. The fact that she's already a field agent and then is demoted, she basically is like, okay, you got to go over here and do this for a while. But even when something like that happens in a job, I would assume in this type of job as well, you're probably given chances to make up for it or to help out where you can. And especially in the situation, as with pretty much every Craig film, Bond is kind of out on his own, and they don't have the ability to give him official support because he's not doing anything official. So they have to kind of be like, okay, well, all right, we'll send the secretary who actually used to be a field agent, so we know she can handle it. We'll send her out there to do it.
I think the two scripts so far have walked a very fine line. I understand completely throughout Skyfall because she hasn't gotten to the point of being fully dropped to the desk job yet. She's still in the liaison capacity somewhere in between, so I get it. In Spectre, specifically because M is being pushed out and he's got only his cadre of 3 people he can trust in the entire service. Again, it works, but I don't think they can go to this well every movie and make it make as much sense without turning her back into a field agent.
Right. And I think that they'll be able to do that at this point. I think that that'll be okay. I think she's proven herself valuable enough. And obviously, since the biggest error that she made was to kill James Bond, and well, he got better. So I think it'll be all right.
Yeah, shake it off. Shake it off. Okay, anyway. But see, I take the opposite tack. It doesn't make sense to me for her to go back to being a field agent. I think maybe an analyst, but never full field agent again. If she goes back to being full field agent, she's not Moneypenny anymore.
Well, the character...
I think at this point, some part of the definition matters. I understand it's a reboot, but there's still something there. Otherwise, we could have called her something else.
Right.
But that's me. Maybe you disagree. Maybe you would like to... Maybe that's why we have 2 hosts. And maybe that's why you in audience land still want to drop me an email and firebomb me and say, how dare you?
Right.
It's not that I'm saying a woman's place is behind the desk. That's not what I'm saying. It's just that there is a certain niche into which a character named Moneypenny goes. And to me, it's not permanent field agent, which we'll bring up again in just a moment.
All right. I understand. That my thing is that I've kind of, with Skyfall, and especially with the close shave scene, once we got there... Which is where we were
going next.
For me, once we got there, I threw away all of my preconceptions about what Moneypenny should be. At that moment, I'm like, okay, you know what? They've hard reboot for sure on the Moneypenny character. They have changed what that is.
I don't remember it going down that way. I remember you at first being adamant.
Because I wanted to hang on to the old version of Moneypenny. I wanted to. And so I was like, no, they didn't show it, so it didn't happen. But come on, it happened.
Of course it did.
And after the second or third or fourth or fifth viewing or so, you have to admit to yourself, or at least I have to admit to myself, that it happened and move on. move on with my life.
The only thing that was going to interrupt that rhythm was if somebody showed up for a pizza, and the pizza boy probably would have been asked to join in while Barry White was playing. I'm just saying.
I got a large sausage for someone here. What's that? You don't have any money.
I got some extra cheese.
Well, I'm Moneypenny. Oh, gosh, no. Let's not ever do that. For the love of all that's holy, never again allow me to go down that path. Oh, jeez.
Yeah, but I have to admit, and I thought this right away, and it was the only thing that bothered me about Skyfall more was, as everybody knows, the law-abiding citizen bullshit. But we're not talking about that right now. No, them doing it is wrong. Just as it was wrong when it was Samantha Bond in the VR glasses before the fan theory. Because at that point, it's Bond's whack-off fantasy fine. But in terms of them actually doing it irrevocably, they now know each other in the biblical sense. It's all done from here. They've had the close shave. And I know people say it's possible to stay friends afterwards and never have it happen again and not have it. Yeah.
It's possible, just not probable, is what I would say. I have seen it happen, but I've seen it go sideways way more times.
And she throws her date in his face from London to Rome. But I think that was one of the few major miscues of the Daniel Craig era, is I don't think they ever should have done it. Ever.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. However, like I said, once I guess I just got to the point where I did accept that part of it. And so therefore, kind of just at that point, I'm like, okay, it's a different Moneypenny. It's a different world. It's a different Moneypenny. This is it. This is what we've got.
It's the age of the hookup.
So I kind of didn't want to, but I accepted.
Now, prior to Naomi Harris entering into the picture in the Daniel Craig era, we of course had the Moneypennyless era between Die Another Day and Skyfall. Mm-hmm. Now, one would think that amidst all the hype that surrounded Casino Royale coming out, one would have thought that a lead-up of other Bond things going on would have garnered some major press. Now, it is entirely possible that across the pond from where Eric and I sit, perhaps out in Europe, this was a much bigger thing than it was over here. But frankly, and I say this as someone who hung out in bookstores constantly. I mean, I was at 2 different bookstores at least once a week for over an hour at a time. And believe me, I was looking for all the James Bond stuff I could handle. And yet, not once during that period did I ever come across this little trilogy that started off in 2005 called The Moneypenny Diaries. Did you? I
had never heard of the existence of this thing until you said, hey, we're going to do a Moneypenny episode. Here's some books to read for it. And I was like, what? This is a thing. Yikes. Wow. All right. Well, we've got to talk about these. We've got to talk about these in depth a little bit. And, we obviously go in order. We have to. That's the one thing about these books. It's a trilogy. It's 3 books.
Really?
They are very much...
It's a trilogy with 3 books?
Well, as opposed to the trilogy of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which is 5 books. So, yes, it's a trilogy of 3 books. The one thing about this, though, is that most of the time when authors write multiple books, there is the ability to read one book without the others, other than just the first one. Obviously, the first one typically is the one that you can read without the others, no problem. And that holds true here. You can definitely read Guardian Angel, the first book of the series, and leave it at that and be okay.
And Eric is probably twitching a little bit, wanting to say one added sentence onto that.
What, that I wish we had done that?
I heard him say that, didn't you? Out there in audience land? Just saying.
Okay. I'm not going to make any secret of it. I was not particularly thrilled by this book series. The way it was written, and we should explain the idea behind these books, is that this person, Kate Westbrook, is actually the niece, right? It's the niece of Miss Moneypenny.
Miss Jane Moneypenny.
Jane Moneypenny, yes. Another, so now we know for sure it's a hard reboot because our new Moneypenny is Eve.
And just for the record, Ian Fleming never gave her a first name because she's a woman. Who needs it?
Yeah. Like, I gave her one name. Aren't you happy about that? I didn't call her Hey You. Gosh, nobody's ever satisfied these days. Smoking
Hey,
cigarette.
baby Moneypenny.
So the books are written. We are intended to believe, as these books play out, that James Bond was a real person, that Miss Moneypenny was a real person, and in fact, everybody in the Fleming books, were real people, and in fact, everybody except James Bond was actually named exactly what they were.
Not necessarily. I'll disagree on that point because she did point out that she had fictionalized a lot of the names. So I think that she was trying to be in keeping with the idea that there could be cover names involved. So I think that because she's going along, and also to be fair with that these characters are real, that was Ian Fleming's conceit as well, was that he was writing about real characters and that they were in fact pissed off that he was publishing these books about James Bond, which was one of the things that always infuriated me about the Ian Fleming books because, one, under the Official Secrets Act, which is really, really strong, actually, that could never have happened. And the idea it's kind of appalling, especially when you think of someone else associated with the James Bond universe who was, in fact, a officer in some form of intelligence, the SOE, with British government during World War II. And whenever you would ask Christopher Lee what he did during the war, his answer was, "Can you keep a secret?" "Yes, so can I." And he never talked about it, ever.
Indeed.
And that's how it goes in the non-United States of the modern era real world.
Although he did admit at one point to Peter Jackson that he did know what a person sounds like when they've been stabbed through the back.
Specifically in the lung.
Yes.
But that's
Christopher Lee was a bit of a badass. Let's leave it at that.
But that's not giving up your secrets.
No. You've seen it happen once. That's all. Not going to say when, not going to say where. Not saying it was me. Could have been me. I'm just saying.
So this Kate Westbrook character's conceit that all of this is real is in keeping with Ian Fleming, and that's okay. And by the way, of course, even though that's the name of the book, it is not written by a real Kate Westbrook. It is written by someone named Samantha Weinberg, whose previous works were primarily in nonfiction. So
what we have here is the assertion by Miss Westbrook in this, or Dr. Westbrook. I'm sorry, she gave herself a degree for the pseudonym.
Yes, she's a history professor.
Dr. Westbrook's assertion is that she is the niece of the real Miss Moneypenny, Miss Jane Moneypenny, who, for some unknown reason, despite it being completely against every rule in the book, kept a personal diary, a very detailed personal diary of everything that happened in her life, including when she was working for the Secret Intelligence Service. And then she set up to specifically have these diaries delivered to her niece exactly 10 years after her death. She wanted 10 years to pass before the idea that she had technically broken the Official Secrets Act to be revealed, because somehow that would make it okay.
Now, with that said, one, did you buy that Jane Moneypenny would have actually written diaries while in the employ of British intelligence?
No, not even a little bit, especially when I start my mind. When I go into this, my first, let's be honest, when I think of Moneypenny, the first image that pops into my head is Lois Maxwell. That's just the way it is. When I think of her Moneypenny specifically, now Fleming's Moneypenny, we don't know enough about her. Maybe she loves writing in journals. I don't know. We just don't know enough about her to really make that stipulation one way or the other. But the Moneypenny that we know would never break the rules like that. Not like that. I can't see her doing something so flagrant. But that's not the least of the things that supposedly happen in these books that I would not see my version of Moneypenny ever doing.
Now, one thing just to let our audience know, I mean, most of our audience is pretty used to how we operate, but just in case, because we know we always pick up new people from time to time, we spoil the hell out of everything.
We do. And sometimes we're sorry about it because we really want you to go out there and experience these things on your own. I'm going to go ahead and throw it out there that I'm not really sorry about spoiling any of this because maybe, just maybe, I'm saving someone the time and trouble of having to read this themselves.
For me, I don't want to go full spoiler, but I'm thinking we have to go about 80%. So we will be revealing major plot points. I don't want to give away the end, but...
Are you talking about the big surprise that you knew
we'll
at least...
We'll get to that part.
3 pages into the book, too?
We'll get to that part just fine. No, I mean the other end. Where,
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And I also think it's important to take these books one at a time.
Here's the one thing I do want to state about them. Unlike, like I was saying, unlike most book series that are written, I mean, if you look at like the Harry Potter series, for example, 7 books. However, you could pick up any one of them, read it, and get a complete story. Yes, it will be better if you had read the previous books. And if you read the books afterwards, those will be better for having read the ones before it. However, J.K. Rowling is able to write a book that does stand by itself, even though it is part of a series. There is no way in hell you could pick up book 2 or book 3 of this series and know what the heck was going on without having read the original, without having read the first or the second. It's just not possible. They're just not written in that way. You have to know the backstory to even begin to understand what you're being told.
I would also say that if you really want to get the most out of these books, you absolutely have to have read 4 Ian Fleming novels. The ones that you really totally have to have read are On Her Majesty's Secret Service, during the events of which these books start taking place.
Yeah.
You Only Live Twice, and The Man with the Golden Gun.
Yeah.
Now, with that said, I don't think you get as much flavor from On Her Majesty's Secret Service if you didn't read Thunderball first, because that's why we call it the Blofeld Trilogy. Therefore, Thunderball, On Her Majesty's Secret Service, You Only Live Twice, and The Man with the Golden Gun, I think, are definite should-reads before you start this if you really intend to go down this rabbit hole.
So basically, if you want to understand what the hell is going on in the Moneypenny Diaries, you have to read 7 books.
Yes.
See, my 3 books of a trilogy isn't sounding so weird now, is it? Because actually it's 7 books of the trilogy now.
And I'll also just go out on the shortest limb ever and say that this was sold as the trilogy. It was not sold as 1 books. Yeah, we do know it was sold. We'll publish 3 of them.
Yeah, it was obviously written that way. And here's the thing: they're not that long. They could have been published as 1 book, or maybe 2. It would have been easy to break them up into 2 and call it good. They were not long books.
And yet, did they feel like not long books?
Oh no, they did not. They drug. And here's the thing: it's not necessarily the writing itself is not horrible as far as getting through the reading. It's not bad writing necessarily. It's hard to read because we know the characters, and a lot of the time we're seeing characters act in ways that we would not expect them to based on our knowledge of them. So if you hadn't read any of the Fleming books or watched any of the Eon productions, especially, pre-Craig era, then that part would be a little bit easier. The problem is in the very idea of the books, she immediately creates a problem in their writing, and that is it's very disjointed and it feels like 4th person accounts because we're reading little snippets of a diary written in 1st person, but then we jump out of that and go to a separate section written by a different 1st person, and it's very hard to get immersed in the story because it is broken up into such little chunks, and then it changes to somebody else's point of view in a different time, in a different place. And it doesn't do it smoothly. It doesn't do it in what I would consider well. It becomes very, very... I found that I was able to get through these books in a timely fashion only because I forced myself to read while I was walking on the treadmill to get some exercise. So I literally was a captive audience. So for an hour at a time, it was either read this book or watch Fox News because that's the only thing that the gym had on the TVs. So, of the 2, I do prefer the books.
Now, with that said, before we get too much further into the shredding here, I do want to point out that there is a very redeeming quality to be had when we're discussing the first book. Can you guess what that quality might be, Eric?
I'm not sure I know where you're going with this. I'm sure I'm going to understand when you say it, but I'm not sure I can guess.
It is that through the course of the first of these books, which would be Moneypenny Diaries, Guardian Angel, there are 10 mentions of chickens.
The first of which is actually direct reference to the chickens we all know and love.
Yes, but my favorite one is, I'm not proud of what I have just done. I feel like a lowly sneak. 006 arrived back yesterday with 625 in tow and a rubber chicken, which he presented to 007 with much hilarity.
Oh, yes, I remember the rubber chicken.
Atmosphere that greets an agent's successful return from a mission. Okay, now, ladies and gentlemen, unless it's me or Eric doing it, can you actually imagine anyone presenting James Bond with a rubber chicken?
I can't imagine anyone getting away with it other than maybe Q. And of course, that rubber chicken would contain a grenade or some kind of nuclear device. But short of that, no. And I especially, which was it 009?
006.
006. Like, can you imagine Alec Trevelyan giving Bond a rubber chicken? So we know how Sean Bean dies in this movie.
No.
We know how Sean Bean bites it this time. He hands James Bond a rubber chicken and is never heard from again. No.
Bond reveals turns out to be a grenade from Q Branch, which he then pulls the pin off.
But yeah, plenty of chicken love in Guardian Angel. But so let's talk about how the book gets its title. The first book is the Moneypenny Diaries, Guardian Angel.
And it's also worth noting that one thing Ian Fleming did do was give Moneypenny, even though she was a doormat, something of a background. She had been in the Royal Navy. She was a Wren, and she had achieved the rank of lieutenant. Miss Westbrook, on the other hand, has decided to scrap that, and instead, Jane Moneypenny was born in the then British colony of Kenya, and her father disappeared. Dun, dun, dun. While she was at a young age, presumed dead. So
that won't come back in any future books.
No, of course not. And then, of course, her mother dies a horrible death in an uprising. Damn natives. Even though, of course, Jane Moneypenny sympathizes with the natives and hopes for their independence, and just happens to get on a spontaneous vacation to Kenya on the day of Kenya independence, but that's at a later date. But so she moves to London with her sister, and she decides that since her father was in quote-unquote government work, she'd try for a secretarial position with the government. And that's how she, totally without expecting to, ends up working for the Foreign Office and the man we would come to know as M.
Indeed.
And as our story picks up, we are going through the year of 1962. Now, some people may realize that not only would this be when, according to the Ian Fleming novels, this would be about when we start having the tragic events, the aftermath of tragic events of On Her Majesty's Secret Service, but it's also when something else happened in Cold War history of rather great importance. Some little thing about Cuba or something. It involved missiles.
It wasn't about about the sandwich?
No,
I love a good Cuban. Yeah. Duck and cover. I remember that. Not from living it because I wasn't alive during that time, but I remember seeing the videos and thinking, oh my gosh, people actually believed that hiding under a desk would save them from a nuclear blast?
But yes, of course, the Cuban Missile Crisis happened in 1962, and Miss Weinberg, or Ms. Westbrook, if you would like, has decided that we're going to insert the British Secret Service into the events of the Cuban Missile Crisis.
As one does.
I do have to say, as I was reading Guardian Angel, this premise does not strike me as altogether wrong. It makes sense that a spy of Bond's caliber would be involved in something this major.
Absolutely.
In
part,
this case,
I do not have a problem with.
In this case, what the mission ends up being is that Bond is sent undercover into Cuba so that he can gather intelligence about just what the Soviets are doing there. Because the conceit of this story is that it wasn't just American U-2 spy planes that saw those missiles in Cuba and had Adlai Stevenson saying, "Do you deny these charges? Don't wait for the translation. Answer me now," which Star Trek later revealed Star Trek 6, but that was actually from the Cuban Missile Crisis. But in this story, it's actually close-up photos taken by Bond that proved that the missiles were in Cuba. Now, writing real history into these kinds of stories is a double-edged sword. Mm-hmm. If somebody does their research, it can be really cool.
Yeah. I think a great example of that is the novel, not the movie, but the novel of Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. That was a fantastic way to weave real history into a completely fictional story. Not only fictional, but fantastically fictional. It was very, very well done.
I will agree that the novel is great. The movie sucks.
The movie was awful. Oh my gosh, so bad. But read the book. The book was good.
Yes.
Yeah, when done well, weaving real history into a fictional story is amazing. And that part of the story, Bond's involvement in the Cuban Missile Crisis, I'm perfectly okay with.
I'm okay with it, and I'm not. The reason I'm okay with it is it makes sense in the abstract. But from the perspective of remembering how the novels went, Bond was a frickin' basket case in between the events of On Her Majesty's Secret Service and You Only Live Twice, which is when this story takes place.
It's the classic tale, boy meets girl, boy marries girl, girl gets shot, boy goes to Cuba. I mean, come on, it's classic. Everybody's done it.
But the idea presented in You Only Live Twice is that Bond was such a basket case and had done abso-freaking-lutely nothing of import since Tracy's death, that he was afraid that M was going to put him to pasture, literally, because it says so in the book, as a chicken farmer.
Chicken farmer.
Because he
loves chickens.
So while Samantha Weinberg is proving to be somewhat faithful to Ian Fleming for her own conceit, and I'll give her this much, she has to be a little unfaithful. So for the course of the first book, I ended up being okay with what Bond did with reservations.
It would have been better had it been a different agent of the British Secret Service. Had it been any other 00, it would have made perfect sense. Had it been Bond without any knowledge of the other novels, which are actually far more canon than this, then it would have been okay. So I understand what you're saying. My thing was that the next bit that I'm sure we're going to talk about is so ridiculous and so outside of any character that we know, even the updated version, as we spoke about, as to be just so dumb that it makes me at least want to assign some logic to the first part.
Now, what we're talking about is, Bond goes off to Cuba to enjoy himself some rum and cokes.
Oh, yeah, and some red stripes. Wait, no, that's Jamaica. Red stripe. It's delicious.
Hooray, beer. But meanwhile, M decides that some of the information that he's getting is so important, especially because he believes that the CIA's sources inside of Cuba are not to be trusted, that he wants to go directly to America and deliver his intelligence to the cousins, as Americans are referred to by the Brits, and that's fine. Mm-hmm. That's how they are.
Yeah.
He wants to deliver it in person. And this makes sense to me. I'm okay with this.
Yeah.
We're not in the era of cell phones and video phones and crap like that.
Yeah.
This makes sense to me. And he brings Moneypenny along. People do this with their
personal
executive
secretary.
assistants.
Okay. Again,
fine.
Yeah, I'm with you so far. I'm on board so far. It's you're stretching, but you're not breaking plausibility at this point.
They meet with Kennedy in person. Again, head of British Secret Service meeting President of the United States. Fine. I'm good with this.
Yeah.
Especially because they didn't go right there. They went through the intermediary of Bobby Kennedy, who was John F. Kennedy's intermediary for frickin' everything. Mm-hmm. So again, fine.
Yeah.
We insert the Kennedys, and we do it very plausibly, very neatly, and I love the comparisons Moneypenny makes to 007 and Kennedy. That, to me, was actually one of the coolest parts about this book. Was when she says that at first 007 could learn a few things from this Kennedy guy, which I thought was awesome. And let's face it, we know now about this Kennedy guy.
He was a smooth operator.
And a big James Bond fan, which is part of why we have James Bond movies.
Indeed.
So you're with me so far that this is okay.
Yeah. Yep. So far, no problems.
And did you get the same feeling I did with the little warm fuzzy about the comparison between Kennedy and 007?
Oh, absolutely. I could see John F. Kennedy being a secret agent if he went that direction. If he'd have turned that direction instead of turning into like, okay, so do I want to go secret agent or do I want to go public politician? Let's try this politician bit. If he'd have turned the other way, I could definitely see him being the James Bond type.
Totally agree. So far, so good. Now, M delivers his report. Kennedy is concerned because Kennedy is a smart man.
Mm-hmm.
And M has to rush back off to England, but there's a couple bureaucratic loose ends to tie up. Can Moneypenny stay an extra day? Again, I'm okay with this.
Yeah, she's his personal secretary. She is there specifically to handle the things that he cannot personally deal with, such as paperwork issues and things like that. So, yeah, so far, still okay.
Now, one of the things that's being arranged for is for the CIA to deliver a very special radio transmitter. Because again, we're not in the modern era of satellites and cell phones. Sputnik is still making people piss their pants. I mean, yes, it's 5 years later, but still, yeah. So special radio transmitter has to be delivered to 007. CIA's got one. Makes sense.
Okay. Yep. Absolutely. I'm sure they're going to give one of their top CIA agents that mission, right?
If only he didn't get into a car accident.
Oh, so his backup then, his backup,
there
the
are
second
no
best CIA
other
agent.
CIA agents anywhere in all of the United States, especially
What?
Florida.
Well, certainly
So-
they'll get like a Navy SEAL or an Army Ranger or someone
The
from the
personal
FBI.
assistant M, perhaps.
Okay, secretary, even to the British Secret Service head, would be way down on the list of people I would send on this mission. You aren't seriously suggesting that we send Moneypenny on this mission, are you?
I'm not. Samantha Weinberg, on the other hand, has other plans for us.
And this is where all credulity melts away.
Not only that,
and we sit staring at the pages going, what just happened?
Not only that, but the person she's supposed to meet doesn't show up because they've apparently been captured or some bad crap.
Oh, yeah, something.
So she finds some guy who happens to know this dude.
Of course.
And says, I'll give you $250 to take me to Cuba. I bet this'll be okay. There's no chance you're one of Castro's agents. Oh, I can stay at your mom's house? Which happens to be really near where the Soviets are docked? That's great.
But of course.
Yeah. And that's exactly what happens.
Yeah.
It's a good thing he wasn't a Soviet agent.
Yeah, we got lucky on that one. Dodged a bullet, so to speak. Yeah, the second, okay, everything's okay. I can understand her telling the story, but I'm even so, I'm going through this going, okay, they're going to put Moneypenny into more action than she should be. She's not a field agent. She's not. And it would be one thing if she just snuck off on her own completely, right from the get-go, nothing official was ever there. She just decided to do it completely on her own. With the fact that we know she has feelings for James Bond, whether they be romantic or more of a, I almost want to say sisterly, type of, that's the relationship I see them having. Yeah, they flirt, but I think when push came to shove, the Moneypenny that we most identify with is more of a sister to James Bond than anything else. And I could see her wanting to go help him. And I could see her seeking out somebody to go help him.
I could see her looking up Felix Leiter's phone number.
Exactly. I do not see her actually going out on a mission, and I especially don't see her being ordered out onto a mission. Yes, she strays from her mission specifics to go save him even more, which is even more ridiculous, but the fact that she was officially sent on any sort of secret mission whatsoever is ludicrous. It strains all possible, yes, when you read anything that involves the James Bond universe, obviously we're stretching credulity a little bit. We're obviously delving into things that aren't 100% realistic. We love our James Bond villains to be fantastic and have these grandiose plans that no normal person or villain or bad guy would ever have. But there's always at least a grain of truth to it. There's always at least enough to bring you back so you don't have to stretch your imagination to the breaking point. You don't have to leave reality completely at the door and be like, okay, forget it. This is acid trip time. Let's go. The ideas presented in this book, however, require you to take that hit of acid. And I don't dig it. Not at all.
Now, I will say that this totally stretched and broke the bungee cord by which my disbelief was suspending. The bungee cord gone. Dead.
And we're talking a Bond-sized bungee cord. We're talking a bungee cord that will take you from the top of the dam all the way down to the secret entrance to a chemical weapons facility. Okay, that is a big bungee cord.
It really is, because Bond's into big cords.
So yeah, that's a big cord to break.
With that said, I also, in another fandom of nerdery, could deal with the Han Solo at Star's End books. And if I could do that, surely I could make it through Guardian Angel without vomiting. And I did! So even though my disbelief was no longer suspended and the cord broke, fortunately the waters, even though they were shark infested, the sharks were being jumped all the time, so I didn't have to worry about them. I mean, it was like the Great White Hooker was in there just jumping sharks. But
I felt that in this first book, the sharks were there, they were swimming around, and the ramps were being set up. But I didn't feel the actual jump took place until the second book. And
I felt the jump took place when she rescued him off the boat. With that said, it was an acceptable jump.
Well, then in the second book, then we have a three-person tribe, like pyramid formation shark jump all at the same time or something, because it gets weird.
So, she rescues him from near certain death because
his guardian angel.
She is. And the thing is, James Bond admits he was going to give up until she showed up.
That's another. On the one hand, I want to accept it because of the mental place he was in after Tracy's death. However, it doesn't fit with the storyline where he is trying to get back into M's. He wants to get back to work. He thinks the best thing for him is to get back to work. If he wanted to die, that's easy. Dying's easy. Bond has never been the one to take the easy route when it comes to his job. And so that part bugged me quite a bit as well. I think even in that state, Bond would have always been looking for a way out. Even if he thought it was completely untenable, I think he would have been looking for it.
I agree. I think he would have tried to take as many Russians with him as he could.
Yeah.
If he really thought there was no way out, he would have just gone for it. I don't think he would have just sat there and accepted it.
No Way Out, also a good movie about Russian spies. Completely off topic, but it just made me think about it.
Kevin Costner. But anyway.
I really enjoyed that film. I don't know if you did or not, but I actually quite enjoyed that film.
It's been a long time. I'd have to watch it again. Anyway.
Wait, what? Now I'm scared. Coming soon, folks, from Majesty's Secret Podcast, the Costner episode. I don't know how we're going to work that in, but we'll figure it out.
You know what happens when I watch spy movies? I make you watch them with me.
Well, hey, like I said, No Way Out, I really enjoyed, so I would be perfectly fine watching that again and talking about it. So if we can figure out a way to work that into an episode, hey, I'm all for it.
We'll see. In the meantime, Moneypenny helps Bond break out of his Russian boat, and then they have to go complete their mission, which they do.
Of course.
In fashion that's totally ridiculous. And one thing that it bothered me to no end, because it's like, I know. Moneypenny is, even though she's just going over to across the pond to act as an executive secretary, given some special equipment, including something she goes out of her way to point out, this is the stupidest thing I've ever seen. A hairbrush camera. What the hell would I ever use a hairbrush camera for?
I don't know, brushing your hair and taking pictures? I don't know.
Guess what? Guess what takes pictures of some Cuban missiles?
Was it the shoe camera? No. Was it the belt buckle camera? No. It was surely it had to be the hat camera.
The brassiere camera.
Oh, yeah. Booby cam. Love it.
No, it was, of course, the hairbrush camera. And then we end up going back again because they leave the radio behind. And the CIA just would not put up with that shit. So after escaping Cuba once, what do? We send her right back.
Yes, they send her back again. Like, even if you stretch the limits of your imagination to think, okay, there was nobody else available at that moment that they could send but Miss Moneypenny, then they send her back. It's like, seriously, you guys haven't freed up anybody. Like, nobody came back from vacation, nobody, finished their potty break. Like, seriously, you've got nobody who can go do this. Like, they try to make it like, oh, she's the only person who knows where it's hidden. Like, she's proven herself very capable of taking down notes and giving directions. I'm sure she could have, especially since it was hidden under a bed in a room. How hard is it to be like, here's the address to the house, okay, upstairs bedroom, second door to the left, under the bed. Not exactly a hiding place that requires the person who hid it to be there.
Unless you're Samantha Weinberg.
Or Dr. Kate Westbrook. Yeah, it's the Moneypenny's insertion into the action element of this story is absolutely ludicrous. And I understand, like, she's trying to make Moneypenny the star of this series. I get that, but at the same time, it stomps on everything we know about this character, everything we love about this character. Even, ignoring, like, yes, she's taking, if you just look at the books, I think this series is easier to handle if you don't look at the movies at all. If you just look at the books, then you look at Fleming's version of Moneypenny as a doormat, as just another woman in the office, and you want to see her as something more. And these books will give you that. If, however, you've seen any of the movies in which Lois Maxwell plays Moneypenny, these books will be a disappointment for the character because it's not true. And I think that when we're looking at it, we're obviously giving more gravitas to the movie version of Moneypenny than the book version because, well, the movies did that. And so it really, it's hard to imagine this character in these situations. The story itself would work. I think it would work if two things were changed. First of all, the names of everybody involved. If these were just other people. If it was just a random British Secret Service agent, not James Bond. And if it was another random Secret Service agent, not Miss Moneypenny or the secretary to the head of the Secret Service. And then if it were not written in the style it's written to try to make it look like it's a diary of somebody, if it was just written as a story, I think the story elements would work better that way. But because it's trying to cash in on the Bond thing, and so they're writing it as this supposed diary, but yet when you get into the action, it's all first person, it's all narrative, it's all like every detail there. It's like, okay, that's not how people write diaries, so that doesn't work. And then when it does suddenly jump back into the actual style of a diary, you're like, wait, what happened? And then you jump out of the diary and into Kate Westbrook's accounts, and you're like, now we're 20 years on, and nothing makes sense.
See, that's another problem I had with these, and it becomes more pronounced in the next book.
Yes.
But there is, up until the last half of the last book, and this is not complimentary, I'm just foreshadowing, the voices of Jane Moneypenny and Kate Westbrook are indistinguishable from each other without the exact context of the scene they're in.
Gee, I wonder why.
It's just like Die Another Day.
Oh my gosh.
Where
Okay.
everybody...
So what if the Moneypenny diaries actually take place inside Moneypenny's head as she lay down? Oh.
Yeah, we'll get there. So that was a problem that I had. But when all was said and done, because of course Bond and Moneypenny successfully take pictures of the missiles.
Of course.
And the Cuban Missile Crisis goes down the way it does.
Of course.
They all go back to England, and that's almost the end of 1962, except for a few little points specific to this telling, which we don't have to really get into here at this particular juncture. But if this was it, if this was the Moneypenny Diary, singular with a Y, I'd be okay with it. I wouldn't say it was great, but I would say I would rather read this than the majority of things that John Gardner wrote.
I will admit that the writing is easier to get through than Gardner, but I don't know. Even just ending at this and not moving on to the second book, I still feel that the style in which it's written and the characters with which it portrays the story, it doesn't work for me. It makes it so hard. Like, the only times I got into the book were scenes in which they did not specify characters, when there were stretches where, okay, we've established the characters so we don't have to say their names all the time, and we're just like, he said, she said, and like, because then I kind of imagined it just being a spy drama on its own. And then, of course, I was jolted back to the reality of the book when they change scenes to another page in the diary or to Miss Westbrook's and Dr. Westbrook's interpretation in what she was doing when she was reading the books. And I'm like, I don't care what you're doing. Just tell me the story. That's just, oh gosh.
But of course, we know why she has to tell what she's.
Oh, of course.
We'll get there.
Because, yes. So yeah, if you're only going to read one of the three, obviously the first one is the one to read. Like I said, the second one and the third one will make no sense whatsoever without the preceding books.
And if you're only going to read one of them, you're probably better off.
If you're only going to read one Moneypenny Diaries books, hey, why not make it 0? But yes, obviously the first one is the one to do. It is the most believable. As much as we've said this book is completely unbelievable, it is the most believable of the three, folks. So
now, with that said, did you also notice that Moneypenny and the other major female character, I mean, there are some other females in here, but the other major female character both drive the same kind of vehicle?
I've got to admit, I didn't pay that much attention to the vehicle choice.
Citroen 2CV.
Oh, ha ha! It's a good car. It's good, good, solid automobile.
You can take it through a Greek harvest.
Some of our listeners predicted that it might even have been our number 1 on our cars list. It was not, spoiler alert, but go back and listen to episode number 15. Well,
I know. It's pretty obvious what our number 1 was.
Go back and listen to episode number 59, where we did talk about the cars, and you'll find just where that Citroen did or did not fall on either of our lists.
And if you don't know why a Citroen is special, watch For Your Eyes Only, folks.
Exactly.
Citroen.
Oh, yeah.
Now,
if I could get one, oh my God, I would love to drive around in a Citroen. Oh, man, that would be so awesome, especially if I could get a left-hand drive. I don't know. It looks very similar to a Bug, and I fit fine in a Bug.
I mean, I suppose if we fit in my car, which is kind of small too, but still, I don't know.
Sometimes small cars have more room than you would believe. I had a little Honda CRX, little 2-seat Civic hatchback, like with the fastback. I didn't even have to put the seat all the way back, and I'm 6'6". Something about those little cars. Tell you what, though, I got into a Jeep Grand Cherokee thinking, hey, the big vehicle, I'll have plenty of room. Could barely drive the thing. My knee kept hitting the steering wheel. I'm like, what's going on here? This is a big old SUV, and I'm scrunched in here like a clown in a clown car. It's ridiculous.
And then there's the large feet, small pedal wheel.
Whoa!
I have this issue.
Let's stick to the topic at hand, shall we?
Okay.
Whoa.
But no, before we go on to the next book, I do have a point of curiosity, because we do bring this up whenever we talk about books.
All right.
Of the familiar roles in the books, could you cast any of them, and who did you cast?
Oh, it was tough. Like I said, immediately my mind went to Lois Maxwell for Moneypenny. However, as the book progressed, I couldn't place her in that role anymore. She took on because she went into that action role and actual, like, oh, okay, all of a sudden she's doing stuff. All of a sudden she's an agent. She kind of took on that Eve Moneypenny kind of role of Naomi Harris, but I couldn't put Naomi Harris in that timeline. I couldn't do it. It didn't work. So I don't know if I had to cast somebody. For Moneypenny herself, I don't know that I could put any of the actresses who actually played Moneypenny in the films in this version of Moneypenny. If I just had to pick an actress, I don't know that I'd curse anybody with that, but it would be a real tough call. As far as M in this one, M was pretty generic in this one. I could have easily put just about anybody in the M role. It was very, very generic, very, very low profile in comparison. There wasn't a whole lot going on. So I wouldn't be opposed to Bernard Lee in that capacity, but like I say, he didn't really play that big a part to me. His presence wasn't focused on very much.
I was able to stay consistent through the whole series, so all the books are up for grabs.
Oh, all right.
Any others? Or
it's tough. Like, I want, whenever Bond was in there, it seemed to me, I don't know, it was tough. It kind of fluctuated from one page of the diary to the next between Connery and Moore.
Really?
Yeah, it just kind of, like, at the one moment, it would be just the way... And it was always in the way he interacted with Moneypenny. It was always in that particular interaction. I never imagined Lazenby. As much as I would want to put him in this abomination, As much as I would love to curse him with this, I never imagined Lazenby. Dalton never really sprung to mind until the last book. We'll talk about that a little bit. But yeah, it kind of vacillated between them depending on the scene. It just kind of, yeah. I never imagined Brosnan. Like, it just didn't even come into my head. Like I said, Dalton never came into my head until the last book, and that's a totally different story altogether. And I definitely never imagined Craig at all. Not even sort of. So yeah, it was kind of at any given sentence, it could have been Connery or Moore for me.
You're going to totally question my judgment.
And that's totally fine.
I was able to keep consistent casting throughout all 3 books.
All right.
Now, I'm going to be fair to myself here. I had to wait for the Moneypenny character to establish herself before I gave her firm casting.
Okay.
So, like you, because of the era, I wanted to start with Lois Maxwell, and because of the era and because she is Moneypenny.
Right.
Just she is.
Yeah.
I quickly figured out that wasn't going to happen. But the one that I latched onto next stuck. Really stuck. Especially, and this kind of surprises me, but especially when we started talking about Africa and how she was there. That's where, okay, who can I can see this person there, and I can see this person in England, and I know they didn't always have the same haircut that they did in the movies. I've seen her in other pictures. So Samantha Bond
all right,
is who I pictured as Moneypenny consistently once I got a clear picture.
All right.
Now, interestingly, Kate Westbrook was Caroline Bliss. Now, you notice I said they speak in pretty much the same damn voice through most of the thing.
Here's the weird part for me. I did imagine Samantha Bond as Moneypenny, but only in the later books, in the scenes where we're talking about the older Moneypenny. For some reason, like, I imagined, like, she didn't morph into Samantha Bond until she was the older version of Moneypenny. Not the active version during the 60s, but the older version who was just getting ready to send her diaries off to her niece. And I know that's weird.
Aged well throughout.
But like, I honestly could not get a consistent picture of Moneypenny throughout the books. It did kind of differ back and forth. I think the only character that I imagined in my head as one person throughout was probably M, and I did kind of have Bernard Lee in there, but not like a sharp picture. It was more like a fuzzy kind of, he was just there. I think, I don't know if it was intentional or not, but I think she kind of managed to make that M character not as memorable as necessarily maybe you would normally associate with him. I mean, since Moneypenny's supposed to be the star of the show, I can understand M taking a back seat, but for me it was very unmemorable and enough so that I could throw Bernard Lee into that spot, but then not sharp and crisp and clear. It was just kind of a fuzzy, like Bernard Lee-like shape in the chair.
See, for me, from start to finish, and literally from the first moment he showed up, Robert Brown, all the way. That was who I pictured the entire time. Right up to deathbed. Spoiler alert.
Oh, damn. Harsh. No, I'm just kidding.
Just the entire time, it was I heard his voice, especially when he got pissy. Because, you know, how Robert Brown, his gruff was different than Bernard Lee's gruff. Bernard Lee's gruff was too high-pitched, if that makes any sense. Whereas Bernard Lee sounds like a bulldog. I mean, Robert Brown sounds like a bulldog. And that's the voice I heard. So my M was always Robert Brown. Tanner, the only one who's ever really stuck for me is the current one, Rory Kinnear, who actually that's pretty amazing because he has to act past the name Rory, which to me it's like the name Toby. It just sounds silly. But Rory Kinnear is a phenomenal actor, so please don't think I'm insulting him, because no, I've seen him in other stuff, and he's really a good actor, and I do like what he does with Tanner, and it was easy for me to picture Rory Kinnear Tanner throughout these books. And then for James Bond, there was only one voice I ever heard, and it was consistent. Start to complete finish, Daniel Craig.
Really?
And there's a reason for it.
All right, yeah, hit me with that, because I did not hear that at all.
Daniel Craig Bond is the only one who ever would admit his feelings. Daniel Craig Bond has feelings.
Yes.
You know, those things. And none of the other ones do. Connery spilling his guts?
But
no.
I don't know. Craig shows his feelings.
But he also says them. Getting drunk with Mathis. Talking with Vesper. I can see him spilling his guts. And emo Bond.
But,
I can see him being emo Bond.
But I'm
not saying that's the only way I see him, because I also heard him in the action scenes just fine and in other scenes. But that's just it. Every scene, his voice just was easy to pick up.
Yeah,
Craig was my consistent Bond throughout.
Yeah, I didn't get that. Although, like I said, I wasn't trying. When I first read the books, I specifically didn't try to associate them with the movies. I tried more to associate them with the books, since that's really what they were supposed to be tied into. So I didn't try to put actors to them. Some of them just came. Like I said, every now and then I would hear Connery, and every now and then I would hear Moore, and every now and then I would hear Samantha Bond pop up in Moneypenny's
And every now
voice.
and then you get a little bit lonely and no one's ever coming around.
Every now and then. You never know. So, yeah, but no, man, at no point to me did Craig pop up in the Bond character for me. Now, I'm not questioning your judgment. I'm not, because literary interpretation is always completely open. And the fact that we've had so many different actors play Bond means that we have a lot of different sources, and then we can also think of other characters who have played any type of spy-like character and throw that into the mix as well. So no, I'm not questioning your judgment at all. I'm just it's curious to me that was so resolute with you, when for me it was kind of all over the place, but never him.
I'm surprised that we had complete disagreement. I didn't think we'd agree on everything, but we agreed on nothing as far as that casting went. That's just interesting.
That's what's great about books sometimes, though. I mean, that is one good thing about books, is it allows you to picture whomever you want in these pictures. And when you're, sometimes you just have a lot of characters for me in these books tend to be just blobs. They're not an individual. They're just kind of a character that's there. I never imagined a face on Tanner in any of these books. I don't know if you did or not, but I never saw a face.
Rory Kinnear.
Really? I see that. Yeah, you said that. No, for me, no. There was never a face attached to that character. It never solidified for me.
And that brings us on to the next two books in the Moneypenny Diaries trilogy. And folks, it all goes downhill from here. I will say, as always...
Is it called downhill when it just falls off a cliff? Is that really downhill?
It's a steep hill. Really steep hill.
Extremely steep.
Now, as always, Eric and I did not discuss these books before we started recording tonight. I'll just say that this is one of the hardest times it has been to do that. We came close to breaking that silence a couple of times.
There were a couple of moments that, a couple of text messages that went back and forth that alluded to things that were happening in the books without actually getting into specific details. Mostly because I had sent a text message over to you because I thought you were ahead of me in the books. Typically, you're well ahead of me. When we're doing reading, it's usually you waiting for me to catch up. In this case, I was actually a little bit ahead of you, and so I had said something, and you're like, oh, I haven't seen that. I'm like, oh, well then, I'll shut up. But yeah, it was very hard to keep quiet, because when you read something so utterly ridiculous, you have to share it, or it just festers in your brain and burns a hole and hurts painfully.
So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening to the show, because guess what we're doing?
We're sharing so that this is not burned in our brains alone. Again, please take this episode as a welcome invitation to not bother reading these books.
Unless you are a Bond completist, in which case,
click the link on this episode, because we will have a link to where you can purchase these books directly from Amazon, either on your Kindle device or your Kindle app on any compatible device that you may have, phone, tablet, whatever you may have, or the physical copies if they are available. We'll have links to everything available on this link on this episode. So if you really want to enjoy the torture that we enjoyed, we will allow you to.
I will say that I do suggest that you do this the way that I did this. And as I may or may not have ever mentioned, I tend to do most of my reading while eating or drinking at some kind of beverage establishment.
Yeah.
I read the first book primarily over meals, with the exception of a Starbucks somewhere in there for part of the third book. I read most of the second and third books in bars. I suggest that you do the same. It will go down a lot better. if you're drinking.
Or at home with a stiff drink so that you can get completely flabbergasted and not have to drive home.
Indeed,
that's even better.
Because, of course, we do prefer that you are responsible with yourself and with the lives of others.
Oh, yeah, and we never advocate any drinking and driving. If you go out to a bar to read one of these books, stay for a while or take a cab. Uber that stuff home or whatever. Whatever you got to do. Be safe. The last thing we would want is to lose a listener because of some unfortunate accident like that.
Indeed. Now, with that said, boy, am I glad I was drinking through most of the second and third books.
I only wish I could say the same. Like I said, the majority of my reading was done on the treadmill at the gym.
Sucker.
So I was drinking water and I was sweating and I was a captive audience. But man, I wish I could have been drinking. Kind of defeats the purpose, though.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily really good for that old cardiac muscle.
Yeah.
To be exercising and drinking at the same time. I'm going to jog while pounding a fifth of whiskey. No, don't do that. Anyway.
It's probably bad. There's studies and stuff, I'm sure.
The things that intrigued me about the first book, and which is why when you made your offhand comment thinking I was ahead of you, you were into the second book, and I was still pretty upbeat about this because I had just finished the first book. I had problems, but I was okay. And if the second and third books went the way of the first book, I'd have been cool. So I was kind of surprised at your disdain that was apparent. I'm like, really? Okay. And then, a little while later, the message from my side simply said, OMFG. It was not at the same point that Eric hit it. I hit it a little sooner. But yeah. So he gave me one spoiler. And it wasn't really a spoiler because I didn't realize for sure that's what he was talking about until after it had happened a while ago. Because I thought, no, this can't be what it is. Oh, yeah, I guess it is. Okay. I thought something more was coming. But that's okay because that means it wasn't really a spoiler. Spankety spank spank. Anyway.
Do we want to just go ahead and spoil that? I mean, I was like, really?
We'll get there.
What?
Because I do want to set the scene here. Because if we're going to introduce spanking, and ironically, one could call it the Red Room of Pain, considering it is in Russia.
Oh, my.
Comrade Gray will see you now.
Oh, man. Now, if it was Xenia Onatop doing the administration, I could be convinced, but no.
So, in the second book, which is called
Secret Servant.
Again, we're not going for bondage imagery at all, are we? This takes place around the time of the events of The Man with the Golden Gun. So, we have James Bond coming back, trying to kill M, getting rehabilitated, and then sent off to go after Pistols. It just strikes me as weird that his name is ever Pistols. But anyway. So, while Bond is basically off in the background, Moneypenny's got her own problems. One thing that was introduced in the first book was her lover, whom she refers to as R, just because it's a conceit, actually, in a lot of pre-1970s writing to refer to characters by single initials. Mm-hmm. It's something you will find a lot of authors doing in the late 19th century and really through the first 2/3 of the 20th century. It happens a lot.
And so for that, I don't really have a problem either because Moneypenny is used to a environment in which many characters, many people she knows are referred to just single initials. She's got M, she's got C, she's got Q. So yes, I'm perfectly fine with that part of it. That part doesn't bother me in the slightest.
Now, I was okay when he was an architect, but when it turns out that, no, actually he's an MI5 agent.
Oh.
Who saves her from the Russians when she's about to be beaten up in her own bedroom. Oh my. Yeah. Yeah. At that point, I started losing all the fuzzies that I got from the first book. And then we go on.
Like, what's happening here? Holy crap.
One of the things I really liked about the first book, and I thought was going to be a great positive, was the inclusion of real history. Because as people who've listened to our Cold War episodes know, I love this stuff, especially this era. I find it fascinating. So I thought this was cool. And yeah, sharks were jumped, but Cuban Missile Crisis, cool. Kennedy's cool. Reaction to Kennedy assassination, needed if you're going to have events taking place during November of 1963. either that or you're under a freaking rock.
Yeah.
So, okay, cool. And this is also where there were some shakeups in the intelligence world of actual defectors and traitors being discovered, including Kim Philby.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't know the story behind that, you are obviously not the insomniac that I am, who consistently ends up watching those channels that end up showing the documentaries about these things over and over and over again, which is how I can fall asleep to them so fast. But anyway, enough about me. If you don't know who Kim Philby is, look it up, seriously, and possibly get a reputable book about it if you are interested in the subject, because this is some fascinating stuff. I mean, traitor inside British intelligence forever. So interesting stuff. But Kim Philby is written into this.
Yep.
And not just like Kennedy's written into it for a scene or two. No.
Oh, no. He's a character.
He's a real character doing things that real Kim Philby would never have done. And real Kim Philby's wife, oh my God, did we have to go there? See, Moneypenny is assigned to be her special friend.
You make it sound so much worse.
I'm good at
that. But really,
I'm doing it on purpose.
I mean, it's so true, though. I mean, that's literally, it's that bad. It really is.
So Kim Philby is this person who has been betraying the British intelligence service since pre-World War II,
mm-hmm.
and he finally is about to get snuffed out, and he hightails it off to Moscow before that can happen,
but of course,
leaving his wife and children behind.
But of course.
So his wife, Eleanor, is spirited off from where she had been living in Lebanon to England. And it's kind of hoped that she can be used as a lure to bring Philby back, because much as they hate the bastard, they think it would still be a bigger slap in the face to the Soviets if he turned back again. So but she's on a knife edge. She doesn't want to believe he's a traitor and any of that sort of thing. And
but of course,
being around these fearsome intelligence agents is kind of creeping her out. She needs a special friend. So Moneypenny, having shown herself to have done so well in Cuba, even though we have female agents who are described in this book, and we only have one who really, really jumps out, named Miss Fields. Not that Miss Fields. Oh, God, not that Miss Fields. I would have liked that Miss Fields. I would still like that Miss Fields. She can visit me anytime she'd like. No, different Miss Fields.
All right.
But there's also mention of two others who are never named.
Okay.
So two other female agents plus Miss Fields who could have been her special friend.
And it's specifically pointed out on more than one occasion that the Russians pay almost zero attention to female agents.
Yes, and Miss Fields has a special talent for ferreting out bad guys. But no, Moneypenny will be Eleanor's
secretary.
Special friend.
That's a fantastic idea.
And they get along famously. But Eleanor decides to join her husband in Moscow. But not before the quick-thinking Moneypenny gives her an opportunity to write to her if ever she needs help. Because
of course,
that is just what you do. Could never happen. So Moneypenny thinks she's a failure. And M says, nope, you did a bang-up job. Great. Now we'll go deal with this MI5 boyfriend of yours and crap and the KGB trying to recruit her. And she says she almost does it. What the bloody F?
That's where, so we mentioned earlier that her father died under mysterious circumstances. Well, part of the storyline here is that the KGB knows about her father dying under mysterious circumstances and tries to get her to turn using this information by luring her out, by sending in this guy who might know something. And if she'd only give us some information about what they're planning to do in Berlin or something like that, then they'd be happy to give her some more information. And she goes so far as to get the information. She just doesn't take the step of actually giving it to them. And
that's not.
I could understand the temptation to do so. Absolutely. There's always temptation. You're always tempted to do the thing you're not supposed to do. But the Moneypenny that we know and love would not succumb to that temptation, not to the point of actually going and getting the information. And there were so many times when it would have been so much easier. Like, I was practically screaming at her. I'm reading this book and I'm like practically screaming at Moneypenny. I'm like, just go tell M that this person is asking you for this. He'll take care of it. He will give you some BS to give him. You'll get the information you want. And I'm like, it's a perfect opportunity for them to feed some false information to the enemy. This is the perfect opportunity. You've got somebody coming up to you asking for information. You go to your boss and say, hey, somebody's trying to get me to give information. You got any false information you want me to give them? That way I get what I want. They get what they think they want. We all get what we want on our side. Everybody's freaking happy. But no, they have her almost succumbing to the temptation to actually give secrets to the enemy. Just so much so, like she actually went and got the information they were asking for. Granted, it wasn't something super, super top secret, but that's the way it works. They start by getting you to give them something you don't think is super important. And then they get you on the hook, and then they get you to give them the good stuff. That's, and she even acknowledges that she knows exactly that that's how it works. She acknowledges that she knows exactly what's happening, yet she's still tempted. Sorry. Goose Brava. Let me just chill for a sec here.
But yeah, a whole bunch of dumb shit goes on.
It's just so ridiculous. Oh.
And then, of course, Moneypenny's special friend, who is now miserable in the Soviet Union, writes to Moneypenny. And what does M say? Yes, go to her.
In fact, we're going to make you a special operative, and we're going to send you on a secret mission to Russia, because that's what secretaries do. Go on secret undercover missions to Russia.
Especially ones who have already been attacked by the KGB.
Oh, just reliving it makes my head hurt.
So she gets into Russia. And
yeah, no problem, evidently. Yeah,
see,
it's all cool.
That, just the moment this was discussed is when I sent my OMF to you. So we hadn't gotten to your part yet.
I was already really? Again, there was nobody else available for this mission? Somebody's got to be in charge of scheduling. Did nobody check the calendar to make sure all of the agents weren't on vacation on the same week? I mean, you'd think that would be something that they would be required to, verify. Like when I need to take a vacation day, I have to write it on a calendar so that anybody else in my department has to check that calendar before they write it down to see if somebody else already has it off. You'd think they could implement a simple system like that at MI6 to make sure that nobody had the same days off. I'm just saying.
But instead, Moneypenny goes, and lo and behold, yes, Kim Philby says he will be happy to leave, but he has to leave separately from her special friend Eleanor, who is just going to hole up in the embassy.
As one does.
He and Moneypenny escape on a train. Did anyone think this was a good idea?
Nothing bad happens on trains in the Bond universe. Oh, wait a minute.
Especially not after Moneypenny goes to the special KGB spa.
This is the part where I sent you a text message and said, I think Moneypenny just got spanked by the KGB. Because she goes to this spa with her friend Eleanor, and this big burly woman comes in to give her a special massage. And Eleanor thinks it's just hilarious. Oh, look, you're getting a special massage. I don't see anything wrong here. I'll just leave the room. At which point, Moneypenny is beaten with birch rods. Literally beaten. And at no point, it takes her a long time to figure out that this isn't a massage. They specify in the book that she has welts on her from this beating. And yet somehow she didn't figure out that this wasn't just a special massage until well into it. The fact that this was written by a woman shocks me, because this is the type of thing that I would expect from a guy who was living out some erotic fantasy involving Moneypenny getting bent over and spanked. Like that, I would expect that. I would almost okay, all right, get it out of your system, buddy. It's all good. All right, you've done it. You're done. But a woman wrote this. I'm just like, what is happening here? And, she's not sure at this point that she just got spanked by the KGB. She's pretty sure, but she's not 100% sure until even later. And then she's like, oh, yeah, there's that big burly woman that spanked me. I guess I was actually getting spanked by the KGB. I literally can't even right now.
And then, of course, Philby betrays her, which we knew he was going to.
He's a frickin' double agent. What did you expect to happen here?
Which means she runs back into the same Russian who tried to kill her in her own bedroom, and who also happens to just happen
That's the way this book goes, guys. That's the way this book goes.
Who brainwashed James Bond into trying to kill M.
As one does.
What? Just no. And I also didn't like the side suspicion about Kishi Suzuki suddenly possibly being KGB. What the fuck?
Yeah. Okay. I had kind of ignored that, but at the same time, I was like, wait a minute. No. They actually postulate in the Moneypenny Diaries Secret Servant that Kishi Suzuki was drugging Bond the entire time to keep him there because she was in love with him. And that's why he didn't have his memory, because she was continuously drugging him. No.
Yeah, just no. And then the whole convoluted crap that ends up with this Russian agent who brainwashed Bond and tried to assault Moneypenny in her bedroom.
Surely
when her
he's
lover saved and who
surely
killed
he's
her
a model.
lover.
Surely he's a model KGB agent, right? I mean, he's nearly
so
perfect.
many sharks are jumped at this point that, like you said, it makes my head hurt even thinking about it. And this is when I knew it's not going to get any better. And in fact, I still didn't know how much worse it could get. Because then we go back to a climate at the office where they're pretty sure there's another spy, but there absolutely cannot be a Russian spy. No, 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 no. Stop saying that. Stop. Who's saying that? You're making me cry. Don't say there's a Russian spy. No, there isn't one. M is a crazy old fool. There is not another Russian spy. And it just gets so ridiculous. I mean, beyond ridiculous.
It's just, yeah, like beyond ridiculous is it's the absolute best explanation. It's just beyond ridiculous. It just gets to the point where it's, okay, we get it, guys. We get it. Listen, Dr. Westbrook, what is, Miss Weinberg, whatever you want to be called, we understand. There's a mole.
And
fudge.
Yeah, and then somewhere around here we get into the next book. They blur.
Yeah, the second, like I said, these could have easily been 2 books. I think it could have been 1 book, honestly. It would have been a long book, yes, but not exceptionally long. These books were not long books. They were hard to get through, but they were not long. So yeah, we transitioned very smoothly from the second book into the third book because there wasn't as hard a delineation. I can't even say the word. Between the first one and the second one, there was a definite break. Between the second and third, not so much.
Yeah, it's just, and then we get into the third book and it gets worse.
It gets so much worse
because it ceases really to be the Moneypenny Diaries. I mean, they abruptly end less than halfway through this book. And they abruptly end after we have had to endure, here's a red herring, here's a red herring, here's another red herring, here's another red herring. If you don't smell like bad fish yet, just wait. Here's another red herring.
Oh, don't forget the fuchsia herring. There's at least 3 of those.
It gets intolerable really fast to the point where I didn't want to read it anymore. I did, because I would not do that to my adoring audience. So I suffered for my art, and I made Eric do it, and I wouldn't do that to my friend either, unless I was willing to do it myself. So I kept reading. And after all of these obvious red herrings, the Moneypenny Diaries abruptly end. Just done. Nothing else. And now we get to Kate Westbrook Diaries.
Yes. Which actually, at that point, was kind of a welcome change because now we're at least, okay, now we're in actual first-person narrative.
See, for me, it's, okay, this is where Stephanie Meyer admits that she was Bella Swan all along. Oh, God.
I'm going to pretend I didn't get that reference.
This is where we start getting the images of this book having had its manuscript possibly written in a spiral notebook with a Hello Kitty sticker on it. And
hey, don't you knock Hello Kitty. Hello Kitty's awesome.
Kind of is, actually.
I mean, it's a Japanese symbol for good luck, The cat says greetings. But anyways, that's neither here nor there in this particular context of the situation.
Yeah, as you can tell, folks, it's breaking down real fast now.
For me, the relief was the fact that, okay, at least we're stopping with the disjointed stuff of going back and forth between the Moneypenny Diaries and the Kate Westbrook Diaries. And we're just, okay, from here till almost the end, we're just getting Kate Westbrook's story. So at least we've only got 1 narrative to deal with instead of 2.
And yet that narrative is effing with my entire Bond universe in ways that I don't appreciate.
No, not at all.
Like M being drummed out as an old fool.
Yeah. When did that happen? Could you back that up a little bit? Because I think we would have noticed in any of the books or movies if that had happened, right?
Like
seems like a thing we would have noticed.
Bill Tanner being a shrinking violet with this. Nope. There was nothing to see here. Nope. He's not that stupid. And then Moneypenny being murdered. Really? You don't do that to my Moneypenny. You mean woman, you. See, I'm not going to use that word because I'm sure that Samantha Weinberg is a very, very nice person, and I have no problem with her as a human being. I only have a problem with the book.
And at least, to be somewhat fair, we do find out that I don't know if that's the part that you didn't want to.
That's the part I was going to leave.
Okay.
Okay. Even at that.
So we'll leave that. The one big surprise that we're not supposed to know until the end is throughout the second half, maybe second 2/3 of the final fling, when we transition into the Kate Westbrook diaries.
And I think we also met this character in the second.
I believe so too. I believe. Yeah. I believe. So Miss Westbrook.
We all know she met James Bond.
Dr. Westbrook is talking with this particular character who's an older gentleman, but he's so suave, so debonair, and
the specific description of his eyes.
Exactly. It's you read the book and you're like, oh, that's James Bond. That's old James Bond. And especially since they've made great care to point out that at no point did we say that James Bond died. Yeah. Oh, most 00s don't live very long, but James Bond is not most 00s. He's smarter than the average bear. So the chances that him still being alive and actually living to retirement age are not impossible. So the fact that she suddenly comes across this older gentleman who seems to know every time she's coming by and seems to really have his finger on the pulse of fucking everything and has a strikingly similar description in the eyes and mannerisms as James Bond. But no, he's not James Bond. Till the last line of the book when Tanner's like, oh, you've already met him. Nobody was surprised, okay? Listen, Samantha, let me just sit you down for a second. Nobody was surprised. Everybody knew that was Bond. Everybody.
We knew it from the moment you described his eyes, which was the first thing you did.
Exactly. Like, you just stop. Just stop. It was bad. Miss Weinberg, your book was bad and you should feel bad. That's why it comes down to.
No, she shouldn't feel bad. I mean,
well, obviously she doesn't because she wrote a book, she sold it, she made some money off of it. It may not have been a international bestseller. Obviously, a lot of the people out there probably don't know about this book, and that's not surprising necessarily to me. But at the same time, why?
And just think, she wrote 2 additional short stories that were published in Tatler and The Spectator, which we did not read, and we're not going to. But,
oh my.
Good on her for getting her work sold. Just, I would have been happy if it had stopped at the first book. And even acknowledged,
this is the part that got me, is that there's some question as to whether or not these were official licensed. After the fact, Ian Fleming's publications did go ahead and give their stamp of approval to them. But there is some question as to whether or not she had authorization to write these books and use these characters prior to actually writing them. I'd like to think she at least had the... maybe it's one of those, Weird Al Coolio situations where her manager told her, oh, yeah, they totally said okay. And so she went ahead with writing them. And then, afterwards, they're like, dude, what the hell? And she's like, but I thought I was okay here. And then it worked out in the end. But I really don't know if that was the case or not.
I will totally give the benefit of the doubt because I will not assign scandal where I don't have all the facts in front of me. I guess that's why I'm not on Fox News. So
zing. Oh.
So I'll assume all was well and good here and that authorization was had. And again, I appreciate the first book. Oh my God, what happened on and the things you can tell because and this is what strikes me as kind of odd because publication-wise, the first book and the second book came out a year apart, and then there was a longer gap between the second and the third, which feel like one book, and the third book feels like it was written in about a day and a half in a really, really intense coffee haze. Because that is actually the part where I can suddenly differentiate between Moneypenny and Kate Westbrook's voice, because Kate Westbrook just goes off somewhere out there beneath the pale moonlight. Just wow.
Yeah, it's It's not good on a spectacular level. And like I said, it did make it, I will say it did make it slightly easier to read the end of the book because it did at least have the singular voice for me as far as, okay, we're not dealing with the Moneypenny Diaries anymore. We're just dealing with Kate Westbrook's story. And then of course they're like, oh, but wait, there's more. When one hidden diary suddenly pops out of the woodwork, and now we're back into Moneypenny stories. It's like, oh, crying out loud.
And then basically by that showing up, we decide that everything that happened didn't need to, because this was had all along and they were just waiting for her to catch up. Oh, for F's sake.
Exactly. It's like, that's what I was wondering. Like the entire time I'm reading the third book, I'm like, okay, if they come out at the end and show that Moneypenny knew who the quote-unquote Civ was the entire time, then this entire trilogy was bloody worthless. If Kate Westbrook doesn't actually figure out who the Civ is on her own, then this trilogy meant nothing. And what happens? A secret diary pops up where Moneypenny reveals the identity of the Civ to Westbrook. And boom, the entire trilogy is negated in value.
I do want to ask you this.
Yeah.
When did you know who the Civ was?
I think it was sometime.
And did you ever think it was anyone else?
No, I never suspected anyone else. There was a brief moment when I worried that Weinberg was going to try to put it on somebody else. One of the characters that we know.
She put so much effort into that I didn't think that was ever going to happen.
That was my worry. I'm like, okay, obviously she's trying to point us this way, but I was worried for a moment that I'm like, okay, maybe she is so one-dimensional as an author that she would try to turn one of the characters that we actually know into this character, into this Civ, into this spy. And I'm like, no, she wouldn't do that. Surely she wouldn't do that. But then I'm like, maybe she would, just to try to get the shock value of it. So there was a brief moment when I thought she was going to either make Tanner or Bond the Civ, just for the shock. Like, I didn't think that that's what it was or want it to be that, but I was worried that maybe that's where the author was trying to go with it. And I was like, oh, that would be so bad. That would be so horrible.
I never worried about that, because then I think there would have been lawsuits and these books wouldn't exist.
Yeah. Exactly.
And I also, again, don't like her last two books, but I give her more credit than that, because she did it's obvious she put real effort into this. I mean, the historical research for this book was outstanding. I don't like what she did with it, but I can totally see that it's there.
These stories written with independent characters and in just a straight either first person or third person narrative would have been decent. Not great, but decent. The fact that it kind of shoehorned in characters that we know and love into positions that we know that they shouldn't have been in. And then this weird first person, third person back and forth with the whole diary situation. It made it hard to read. It made it hard to follow. Whereas the story itself, the actual backbone of it, wasn't horrible. It was just wrong for the characters used. And it was just, I didn't feel the execution was well done in this whole diary scenario. I didn't like that part of it. Like I said, the very bare bones of the story itself was not horrible.
I will say that I figured out who the Civ was the moment the character made real headway on a page. So when you had some real participation by this character on a printed page, that's when I kind of laid it on this character. There was another character I considered, who ironically is the one that Weinberg paid the least attention to trying to divert your attention to. And that's probably why I suspected this character at first. But so the Civ was my second guess as to who it was. And I guessed well before the reveal happened.
I don't know. Who are you thinking?
I don't want to spoil this because this is not a major character in terms of the canon universe we all know. This is one she made up. So I want to give some people the chance to be fooled.
All right. So if any of you out there are willing to put yourself in our shoes,
or if you've done it already, which we congratulate you.
Absolutely. If you have already, we definitely want to hear your thoughts on these books. Hell, I would love to hear from somebody who loved these books. If there's somebody out there listening to this show who tuned in because, oh, Moneypenny, I know these. I know these books. I read these books. I love these books. And they're like screaming at us right now because we didn't enjoy them. I want to hear from you. I definitely want to hear from you.
Hates us now.
What's
you
that?
Know that, right? Miss Weinberg hates us now. You know that, right?
I know she's an avid listener of the show. Sam, I'm sorry.
We don't know. Maybe she is.
I would feel so bad. I really would. But hey, listen, if you're out there and you want to set us, if you feel we didn't understand something, if you feel we missed something, I would love to hear it. Honestly, I would love to give these another consideration under a different light if that's what it takes. Anything. If you ever, as with any of our shows, if you ever agree with us or disagree with us, we want to hear from you. We love getting hey, we know, and we love getting hey, you know what? I think you got this wrong. We've
done 2 of our best episodes that way.
Exactly. So don't ever be afraid to reach out. Tell us whether you like something we've done or don't like something we've done. If you think we've missed something, if you think we hit something right on the head, we want to hear it all. We love hearing any kind of criticism, constructive criticism. We love if you want to give us accolades, we love that too. We're not going to lie. So hit us up. We make it real easy. We've got the Facebook page at facebook.com/Her Majesty's Pod. We've got the Twitter at Her Majesty's Pod. I have my personal Twitter at Eric J. Dewey and my personal email, eric@foureyedradio.com or eric@hermajestiespod.com if it's easier.
And of course, you can get a hold of me, Ziggy, at cinemaontherocks.com or tweet me at cinemaotr. And of course, you can find this episode on hermajestiespod.com.
Indeed. And if you'd like to support the show, we love to bring you these shows. We love to bring you them completely free of charge and without any extra advertisements that aren't necessary. We do so by throwing a little bit of an advertisement on our website. If you go to hermajestiespod.com or foureyedradio.com, you will see a little link that will take you to Amazon. If you click that link, it'll take you over to Amazon.com where you can purchase a myriad of different things. I mean, everything you can think of is available on Amazon. If you go through our link, you won't pay a single penny more than you normally would, but a little bit of that purchase that you make will come back to us to help us keep everything running, keep all these shows coming to you free of charge here on the 4-Eyed Radio Network. So if you're going to shop on Amazon anyway and you listen to any of our shows, please do us that little bit of a favor and just go through our link. And like I said, you won't notice a single bit of difference, but we will, and we appreciate it.
Indeed we do. And so any other thoughts about the Moneypenny Diaries?
You know what? As much as I panned them, and as disappointed as I was with Miss Weinberg's portrayal of some of these characters, I am glad to have read them. As you know, you and I are what we consider completists. We love to absorb every bit of the Bond universe. And these are part of the Bond universe. If you are a completist like us, if you're out there watching Climax, Casino Royale, and James Bond Jr., and reading the Benson novels and the Gardner novels, and consuming all of this bondage, then guess what? These are part of it. So jump in there, dive in there with us. It's not great, but hey, it's part of it.
And you know what else?
Yeah.
I would rather read this entire trilogy again than Devil May Care.
I don't know if I'd go that far.
I would.
You all know from that episode that I didn't hate that book nearly as much as Ziggy did, but my goodness, these were rough. These were definitely rough.
And these were still better than some... I'm glad we did this episode instead of another Gardner episode.
You are always very reluctant to throw those Gardner books up for review because that means you have to read them.
You notice I've pushed them off like 4 times now? I mean over the course of a year and a half. It's kind of like dwarf bread in the Discworld books. You will never go hungry as long as you have dwarf bread because you just don't want to eat it, and anything else will do.
Yeah,
it's kind of how I am with reviewing the Gardner books.
Yeah, it's rough. It's a tough call for me. This particular trilogy was really rough because it did stomp all over some of the characters we love. Like I said, with Tanner, we don't see a lot of Tanner in the films or books, but we get an impression of his character. And these books, they really bring him into it a lot more, but in a capacity that just doesn't mesh with what we know.
Some of it I was okay with.
In these books,
I was actually okay with the subtext of him and Moneypenny.
With him being in love with her and her thinking of him as just a friend?
With it being unrequited, yes. I was okay with that. Because, a crush from afar, but he doesn't do anything. It's kind of like, it's an interesting reversal of the classic Moneypenny Bond thing.
Yeah, it's kind. I don't
like what was implied about that.
Yeah, the whole. It made it very clear that if Bond had ever been serious, she would have jumped at it. Whereas,
I think it made it clear that it happened.
Yeah, there was that too, which I chose to kind of gloss over because it wasn't explicit. But at the same time, I was like, okay. But yeah, it did kind of make it seem as if maybe. But it also made it more like again, we're really comparing the Moneypenny of Lois Maxwell than anything that Fleming ever wrote, which may not be fair considering that these books were written as an extension of the Moneypenny that Fleming wrote to give her more depth, not necessarily the Moneypenny of Eon Productions. But being that the Moneypenny of Eon Productions had existed for quite some time before these books were written, I can't write it off. And yeah, that dynamic, it was right on the Bond side with him being very flirtatious and saying all the things but never really meaning the deepness of it. It was always a friendship on his side, and it was pretty clear that that was the case. But on her side, it was if he said the word, she'd drop everything and be with him. And that's not the Moneypenny that we know. We know it as a mutual friendship with flirtation type of thing. It's a completely different dynamic.
So I saw it as she made it clear that it happened. They did it often. But as mentioned, in the first book, there are 10 mentions of chickens. 10, including a rubber chicken. And that says something. Chickens.
Because you love chickens. You love chickens. Yeah. This was a tough trilogy to read, I'll be honest. Not in density. It's not one of those books where the writing is hard to get through. It's not even hard to get through in a bad writing sense. It's hard to get through in the sense that everything you know about these characters seems to be challenged, and it's hard to allow that to happen and to continue reading. If these were completely different characters and it wasn't written in this pseudo-diary type of thing that they've got going on, it probably would have been a decent story with decent writing that would have been a fairly easy, quick read. Wouldn't have been memorable for sure. We probably wouldn't be talking about it on this show, to be honest. But being that it was written about what it was written about and how it was written, we have to call them like we see them, and I give it a firm...
See, I won't go so far as the rude noises. I think I was rude enough during the course of my ranting, and it was better than Devil May Care. It was definitely better than Devil May Care. So, and I'm still glad we read this instead of 4 Gardner novels.
There you go.
But with that said, I think we've kind of beaten these up in a very special, very Russian way.
With birch rods in a sauna?
Yes, in the Red Room of Pain.
I still, really? That scene is where, all the sharks in all the waters of all the oceans were jumped simultaneously. It's I can't even put into words what I'm reading right now. It's freaking me out.
And on that note...
If you don't believe us, go read them.
Yes, but I think that's going to do it for this episode of Her Majesty's Secret Podcast. Be sure to join us next time when we talk about more bondage! James Bondage.
Oh, yeah.
But for right now, I'm Ziggy Berkeley.
And I'm Eric Dewey.
And you have been listening to Her Majesty's Secret Podcast, only on The Fern.